The War Mania of Mr. Jinks and Mr. Blinks. From Moonbeams from the Larger Lunacy, by Stephen Leacock. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For further information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Algie Pug. They were sitting face to face at a lunch table at the club, so near to me that I couldn't avoid hearing what they said. In any case, they are both stout men with gurgling voices which carry.
"What Kitchener ought to do,"
Jinks was saying in a loud voice. So I knew at once that he had the prevailing hallucination. He thought he was commanding armies in Europe. After which I watched him show with 3 bits of bread and 2 olives and a dessert knife the way in which the German army could be destroyed. Blinks looked at Jinks' diagram with a stern, impassive face, modelled on the Sunday supplement photogravures of Lord Kitchener.
"Your flank would be too much exposed,"
he said, pointing to Jinks's bread. He spoke with the hard taciturnity of a Joffre.
"My reserves cover it,"
said Jinks, moving 2 pepper pots to the support of the bread.
"Mind you,"
Jinks went on,
"I don't say Kitchener will do this. I say this is what he ought to do. It's exactly the tactics of Kuropatkin outside of Mukden, and it's precisely the same turning movement that Grant used before Richmond."
Blinks nodded gravely. Anybody who has seen the Grand Duke Nikolaevich quietly accepting the advice of General Rusky under heavy artillery fire will realise Blinks's manner to a nicety. And oddly enough, neither of them, I am certain, has ever had any larger ideas about the history of the Civil War than what can be got from reading Uncle Tom's Cabin and seeing Gillette play Secret Service. But this is part of the mania. Jinks and Blinks had suddenly developed the hallucination that they knew the history of all wars by a sort of instinct. They rose soon after that, dusted off their waistcoats with their napkins, and waddled heavily towards the door. I could hear them as they went, talking eagerly of the need for keeping the troops in hard training. They were almost brutal in their severity. As they passed out the door, one at a time, to avoid crowding, they were still talking about it. Jinks was saying that our whole generation is overfed and soft. If he had his way, he would take every man in the United States up to 47 years of age (Jinks is 48), and train him to a shadow. Blinks went further. He said they should be trained hard up to 50. He is 51. After that I used to notice Jinks and Blinks always together in the club, and always carrying on the European war. I never knew which side they were on. They seemed to be on both. One day they commanded huge armies of Russians, and there was one week when Blinks and Jinks, at the head of vast levies of Cossacks, threatened to overrun the whole of Western Europe. It was dreadful to see them burning churches and monasteries, and to see Jinks throw whole convents of white-robed nuns into the flames, like so much waste paper. For a time I feared they would obliterate civilization itself. Then suddenly Blinks decided that Jinks' Cossacks were no good, not properly trained. He converted himself on the spot into a Prussian field-marshal, declared himself organised to a pitch of organisation of which Jinks could form no idea, and swept Jinks' army off the earth, without using any men at all, by sheer organisation. In this way they moved to and fro all winter over the map of Europe, carrying death and destruction everywhere, and revelling in it. But I think I liked best the wild excitement of their naval battles. Jinks generally fancied himself a submarine, and Blinks acted the part of a first-class battleship. Jinks would pop his periscope out of the water, take a look at Blinks merely for the fraction of a second, and then, like a flash, would dive under water again and start firing his torpedoes. He explained that he carried 6. But he was never quick enough for Blinks. One glimpse of his periscope, miles and miles away, was enough. Blinks landed him a contact shell in the side, sunk him with all hands, and then lined his yards with men and cheered. I have known Blinks sink Jinks at 2 miles, 6 miles, and once, in a club billiard-room just after the Battle of the Falkland Islands, he got him fair and square at 10 nautical miles. Jinks, of course, claimed that he was not sunk. He had dived. He was 200 feet under water, quietly smiling at Blinks through his periscope. In fact, the number of things that Jinks has learned to do through his periscope passes imagination. Whenever I see him, looking across at Blinks with his eyes half closed, and with a baffling quizzical expression in them, I know that he is looking at him through his periscope. Now is the time for Blinks to watch out. If he relaxes his vigilance for a moment, he'll be torpedoed as he sits, and sent flying, whisky and soda and all, through the roof of the club, while Jinks dives into the basement. Indeed, it has come about of late, I don't know just how, that Jinks has more or less got command of the sea. A sort of tacit understanding has been reached that Blinks, whichever army he happens at the moment to command, is invincible on land. But Jinks, whether as a submarine or a battleship, controls the sea. No doubt this grew up in the natural evolution of their conversation. It makes things easier for both. Jinks even asks Blinks how many men there are in an army division, and what a sotnia of Cossacks is, and what the Army Service Corps means. And Jinks, in return, has become a recognised expert in torpedoes, and has taken to wearing a blue serge suit and referring to Lord Beresford as Charlie. But what I noticed chiefly about the war mania of Jinks and Blinks was their splendid indifference to slaughter. They had gone into the war with a grim resolution to fight it out to a finish. If Blinks thought to terrify Jinks by threatening to burn London, he little knew his man.
"All right,"
said Jinks, taking a fresh light for his cigar.
"Burn it. By doing so you destroy, let us say, 2 million of my women and children? Very good. Am I injured by that? No. You merely stimulate me to recruiting."
There was something awful in the grimness of the struggle as carried on by Blinks and Jinks. The rights of neutrals and non-combatants, Red Cross nurses and regimental clergymen, they laughed to scorn. As for moving picture men and newspaper correspondents, Jinks and Blinks hanged them on every tree in Belgium and Poland. With combatants in this frame of mind, the war, I suppose, might have lasted for ever. But it came to an end accidentally, fortuitously, as all great wars are apt to. And by accident also. I happened to see the end of it. It was late one evening. Jinks and Blinks were coming down the steps of the club, and as they came they were speaking with some vehemence on their favourite topic.
"I tell you,"
Jinks was saying,
"war is a great thing. We needed it, Blinks. We were all getting too soft, too scared of suffering and pain. We wilt at a bayonet charge. We shudder at the thought of wounds. Bah!" he continued. "What does it matter if a few 100,000 of human beings are cut to pieces? We need to get back again to the old Viking standard, the old pagan ideas of suffering."
And as he spoke, he got it. The steps of the club were slippery with the evening's rain. Not so slippery as the frozen lakes of East Prussia, or the hills where Jinks and Blinks had been campaigning all winter, but slippery enough for a stout man whose nation has neglected his training. As Jinks waved his stick in the air to illustrate the glory of a bayonet charge, he slipped and fell sideways on the stone steps. His shin bones smacked against the edge of the stone in a way that was pretty well up to the old Viking standard of such things. Blinks, with the shock of the collision, fell also, backwards on the top step, his head striking first. He lay, to all appearance, as dead as the most insignificant casualty in Servia. I watched the waiters carrying them into the club, with that new field ambulance attitude towards pain which is getting so popular. They had evidently acquired precisely the old pagan attitude that Blinks and Jinks desired. And the evening after that I saw Blinks and Jinks, both more or less bandaged, sitting in a corner of the club beneath a rubber tree, making peace. Jinks was moving out of Montenegro, and Blinks was foregoing all claims to Polish Prussia. Jinks was offering Alsace-Lorraine to Blinks, and Blinks, in a fit of chivalrous enthusiasm, was refusing to take it. They were disbanding troops, blowing up fortresses, sinking their warships, and offering indemnities which they both refused to take. Then, as they talked, Jinks leaned forward and said something to Blinks in a low voice, a final proposal of terms, evidently. Blinks nodded, and Jinks turned and beckoned to a waiter, with the words,
"1 Scotch whisky and soda, and 1 stein of Württemberger beer."
When I heard this, I knew that the war was over. End of The War Mania of Mr. Jinks and Mr. Blinks.